So, hello and welcome to this Adobe Technical Communication webinar. Today we are talking about content transformation and why it's the key to digital success. And to successfully unlock that hidden potential, you need to transform your content. So we are going to talk about why you need to transform your content and what the 4 steps are in content transformation. We will hear about content transformation best practices and what elements should be included in your content transformation toolkit. Just as digital transformation is about unlocking the potential of a business, content transformation is about unlocking the potential of a business content. And that heavy sentence isn't just said by anyone, but by Val Swisher, founder and CEO of Content Rules Incorporated, who I'm pleased to have with us today. Val and her company enjoy helping enterprises to solve complex content problems. She's a well-known expert in the content strategy, structured authoring, global content, content development, and terminology management. Val believes content should be easy to read, cost-effective to create and translate, and efficient to manage. Her customers include industry giants such as Google, Cisco, Visa, Facebook, Roche, and IBM. And her 4th book, The Personalization Paradox, Why Companies Fail and How to Succeed at Creating Personalized Experiences at Scale, was published last year by XML Press. Val is also on the advisory board for the Technical Communications program at the University of Texas. So Val is one of the very great luminaries in our industry, and I'm really heartily pleased to have you with us today, Val. So warm welcome to all of our guests today and to you, Val Swisher.
Thank you so much, Stefan. It's wonderful to be here. I thank you, and I thank Adobe for allowing me this opportunity.
So also big welcome from me. And my name is Stefan Gens, and I'm the Senior Worldwide Evangelist for Technical Communication at Adobe. And my email address, gntz@adobe.com. So feel free to reach out to me, drop me an email, and if you have any ideas for future webinars, any suggestions, any feedback, please feel free to reach out to me. And a few housekeeping things, good to know before we start into the webinar itself. Yes, we do record the session. We will send you an email with a recording link in the coming days, so watch out for that email with a full recording of that session. If you have any questions, we hope you do have, but put them in the Q&A pod on the right side of your screen, and we will try to answer them at the end in the Q&A session. And pro tip, you can hover over the presentation area, and then a slider comes up, and you can make either the speaker bigger or the slides bigger or speaker or slides full screen. So nice pro tip, and feel encouraged to communicate with each other and with us in the chat. And finally, of course, enjoy the presentation. And with that, Val, let me hand over to you, and the stage is all yours. And I stop talking.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Stefan, and thanks everyone for joining us today. As Stefan said, my name is Val Swisher, and I am the founder and CEO of Content Rules. And I'm very excited to be here today talking to you about content transformation, the key to digital success. So content transformation is something that I started thinking about because of this emphasis that seemingly everyone has now on digital transformation. Digital transformation seems to be the initiative of every single company that I work with, that I know of, that I deal with. And let's just start by giving a little bit of a definition. According to Wikipedia, digital transformation is the novel use of digital technology to solve traditional problems. These solutions enable inherently new types of innovation and creativity rather than simply enhancing and supporting traditional methods. Wow, does a lot of stuff, huh? Salesforce says something similar. It's the process of using digital technologies to create new or modify existing business processes, cultures, customer experiences to meet changing business and market requirements. It's the reimagining of business in the digital age Well, holy camole, we make a lot of promises, don't we, with digital transformation? Now, you're going to get more sales, and your service is going to be better, and your customers are going to love you forever and a day. And in the content world, we say we're going to provide personalized experiences as well. So there's a lot of hype that's been created, a lot of hoopla around digital transformation. And the result of this has been a plethora of tools, the latest bright and shiny object. We've got content management systems, we've got marketing automation systems, we have artificial intelligence and cognitive systems, you name it, we have created tools for it. But there's a problem. And the problem is that the tools don't create the new experience. The tools without the content is nothing but wasted time and wasted money. And as I like to say, if you put, what is it that I like to say? If you take your same old crappy content and put it into your new shiny expensive tool, you end up with expensive crappy content. So while I have nothing against tools, and of course we do need tools, it's not the tools that make the difference. What makes the difference is changing the content. You have to change the content. You just can't figure, oh, the tool is going to somehow magically do all of this for you. So we really need to look at content transformation if we're going to take advantage of all these promises that digital transformation makes for us. So what do I mean by content transformation? Well, we need to change the content so that it is more versatile, so that it is reusable, so that we move from this one size fits one in terms of I create content and I use it for something, to one size fits many, so that I can reuse the same content in different ways so that I can take advantage of my new content management system, component content management system, my new marketing automation system, my digital asset management system. So I need to transform my content because historical content, traditional monolithic content, has a lot of problems associated with it. And it certainly is not usable with our new and very full-featured tools. So monolithic content, which means I start at page 1 and I keep writing until I get to page maybe 30 if I'm writing a chapter, 300 if I'm writing a book, it doesn't scale. It's not reusable. It's not easy to tag internally, externally, keep track of it. It's not easy to manage. It ends up being redundant because if I write one size fits one content, then I end up creating multiples of the same content for all my different uses. That leads to what we call content drift. And that's when I have two versions of content that are kind of sort of the same, but not really. So they're inconsistent. And I can tell you after researching a book on the topic, you cannot create personalized experiences at scale with monolithic content. So we're going to need to do something about our content. We're going to need to have a new paradigm and to transform our content in order to create these new digital transformation experiences. This is a very, very basic, bare bones drawing of what content transformation looks like. We work with a lot of customers where we actually need to take their existing legacy content and we need to make it usable. We need to transform it so that we can use it for these types of digital transformation promises. So we take the source content, and I'm going to go into a lot more detail about this. This is just the starting picture. We take our monolithic source content and we chunk it up into components, into small pieces. And we take all of these small pieces and we store them in a component content management system. For example, AEM would be one. And we apply a strategy to identify and make reuse happen. So I make the content reusable and I execute on the strategy of reuse. And then, of course, I've got approval cycles and review cycles and all of that. And then I click the magic publish button and out come all of my different types of output for whatever it is I need. So I'm mixing and I'm matching these different chunks of content. I'm reusing them, so I only create a single chunk of content one time. And I put them together and I publish them. And that's sort of the basics. But let's talk about how we actually do this. Okay. So when it comes to content transformation, and I'm going to take monolithic content and I'm going to make it usable in a structured environment, there are a bunch of things I need to do. And what I'm talking about here for the most part is working with existing content, because we've got tons of legacy content that somehow needs to get from here to there. And it doesn't happen by itself. I will tell you that I did have a customer once in a training class where we were talking about all of this work that needs to be done, who said to me, I thought the tool did that on its own. You know, maybe some magic process kind of waved a wand and magically the tool chunked up the content and figured out how to reuse it and built new maps and did all this stuff. And it's like, no, we have to do this work. And there are 4 basic steps to doing this work. And I'm going to talk about them in detail. The first is you have to find your content. And then you need to decide what you're going to do with all the different kinds of content. What content are you going to take with you and transform? Then you need to decide how are you going to do it, because there are a few different options. And then the simple one at the end, right? Do the work. Not so simple, but you need to do the work eventually because it won't be done for you. So let's take a look at these steps. It is amazing to me how we have lost track of our content. Over time, we have just created more and more and more and more content, and a lot of it is published, and then it sort of just hangs around. I worked with a very large financial company last year and the year before, just eliminating thousands, I'm not exaggerating, thousands of links and content associated with those links that were out on the corporate website. Thousands of links, thousands of pieces of content. Some of them were 5 years old, some of them were 7 years old. We cannot find our content. So how do I find it? Well, you need to check everything, every repository, all of your network shared drives, people's hard drives. We've got content in emails. We've got content, I've seen specifications stored in Slack channels. all of your wikis in your product, all the napkins that people keep writing on, all of your source code management tools, you need to find your content in order to make decisions about your content. Is this simple? Sometimes. For most companies, no, it's gotten completely out of control. I recommend, if you possibly can, inventorying your content, creating an inventory. We have some templates of enormous spreadsheets. Post-it notes. Don't forget all the content in the post-it notes. Amanda, you're right. Inventory your content. File name, title, who wrote it, what date, what revision are you up to? What kind of content is this? What analytics have you collected about your content? This can be a daunting task, but it's really important that you know what content you have and where it is. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do anything with it. So that's the first thing is, it's 10 p.m. Have you seen your content recently? And then you need to decide what content you're going to transform. And when I say transform, what I mean is, and what you're going to select, well, you may have some content that you're just going to take and you're going to chunk up and you're going to put it in your repository. Because maybe you don't need it right now, but you need to bring it with you as you move to this new paradigm. There's going to be a bunch of content that you actually need to convert, right? Chunk up, and you need to do some rewriting. Just because you chunked your content, just because you can use it in multiple places, doesn't mean that it's actually going to make sense to anybody when you do. And this is another thing that people don't get. Writing for reuse is not the same as writing for monolithic delivery and creation and storage of content. Not the same. You need to rewrite content, not saying all of it, but certainly some of it, according to the best practices for creating reusable content. And I'm going to talk about some of those best practices later on in the conversation. But just splitting it into chunks and putting it in there, yes, you have it now, it's componentized, but when you're going to mix it and match it and publish it on the other end, is it going to make sense to anybody? So think about that. And then there's going to be some amount of content that you're probably just going to leave as is. You're not going to work on it. It's old. It's not relevant anymore. You still need to know about it. You may want to take it down from your website if it's still up there, right? But you're not going to do anything with it. You're going to need to put together your own criteria so that you can decide what you're going to do with each piece of content. Here's some of the things that we think about. So when you're looking at legacy content, is it still in use? Is it popular, right? You may need it, right? Is it updated frequently? Is it related to a highly visible product or service? Does this piece of content have high reuse potential? Right? Is it evergreen? Is it boilerplate? You'll need to come up with the criteria that says, oh yeah, this information, I need to bring it along. I'm going to need to transform it. On the other hand, you probably have content that you just don't spend your time on it. Things are end of life if you're not supporting it anymore. If you're not going to publish it again, it's already published, it's already out there. You may not want to spend the time chunking it up and rewriting it and doing all the things you need to. Things that are time dependent, it's about an event. even if the event is imminent. You know, it's a decision to make. Sometimes we have content where the expense of transforming it is actually more than the value of the content itself. And how did we decide that? Well, metrics and analytics are very helpful. Popular people are not using it. You know, it's poorly written. You're better off rewriting poorly written content than trying to shoehorn it into a component-based paradigm for reuse. A lot of times just, you know, kind of delete, start again, and life gets a lot better. So that's just a few of the different criteria that you might want to consider as when you make these buckets of content. What are you going to do with it? That's step 2. Step 3 is, let's say you've decided, okay, I am going to take this content and transform it. Well, there are a variety of things you can do when you transform your content. So let me step back first and say, you have 3 buckets of content. Bucket 1 is I'm taking that content with me and I'm not doing anything with it other than maybe putting it into components. I'm not really going to work on it. You have a bucket that, oh yeah, I really need to work on this content. And that's what this next section is all about. And then you have the content that you're just going to leave behind. I want to make sure that that's clear. All right. So I got this bucket of content and I know that I need to work on it. I need to work on it because I need to make sure that it is mix and matchable. I need to make sure that when someone reads the content or otherwise uses the content, and I've put all these chunks together, it actually makes sense to them. So what can I do? Well, you could decide I'm going to chunk up the content and I'm just going to change the file format. I'm going to go from Word to XML or whatever, InDesign to DITA, whatever I'm going to do. I'm just going to convert it. You can decide that I'm actually going to convert it and I'm going to revise it so that it's organized. I'm going to tag it. I'm going to dedupe it, meaning if I have 2, 3, 6, 12 versions of the same component, right? So I've taken all of my content, and as I've chunked it up, I end up with 5 of the same. Here's how you put the unit into the rack. Here's how you mount it. And I've got it 5 different times. Well, I need to dedupe because I can reuse that and use it only one time. Organized. I'm going to revise it so that it actually applies with my content models, my templates. I'm going to tag it. So more than just chop into components and change the file format. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to revise it. The third thing you can decide to do is go all out. And that's when you do the software part and you do the revision part, and then you go the extra step and you optimize it. When you optimize content, that means you're really standardizing the content. You're standardizing the terminology. You're standardizing your grammar. You're standardizing your style, your voice, your tone. This is a lot of work. Let's remember that one of the things that we're promising with digital transformation and content transformation is that I can have many people creating small chunks of content, and I can mix and match them regardless of who wrote them and when they were written, and I can produce all types of new outputs. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a few slides, but suffice it to say, if we have not followed the same terminology, if we have not followed the same grammar rules, the same style, and someone goes to mix and match the things you wrote, the things I wrote, and put them into a beautiful new online help system, whatever, it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a disaster. I have seen it. I clean up those messes every day. No one taught us how to write for reuse. And yes, we've all got the style guide and we all memorized it by week 6 of working for the company, and then we promptly forgot it. And if I'm going from page 1 to page 300, as long as what I've written makes sense, we're good. But once I start mixing and matching, if we haven't written the same way, not so good. That's very confusing for our readers and the people consuming our content. Hopefully I'm drilling that into people, beating you into content submission. So decide what you're going to do. And then, hey, simple, do it. Easier said than done. This is really important. This is the key to all of the promises that we're making, all the things we're telling upper management, all that money we're going to save, right? All the time we're going to save, all the new things we're going to do. You have to componentize your content and make it so that it's understandable and it's consistent. It's the key to all these different delivery mechanisms. By the way, when you start training your AI system, which you will if you're not today, garbage in, garbage out, you're much better off training your system with content that actually is consistent, holds together, makes sense. And of course, if you want to adapt your content to different ways of delivery, you need to componentize it and structure it. And then you need to make sure that I like the term holds together, that it's one corpus of content that uses the same words in the same ways to mean the same things, doing the work. So those are the basics of what content transformation means. You're taking monolithic content, you're splitting it into chunks, into components, you're putting it into a management system and it's tagged and findable, and you're also making sure that the pieces, when they are put together, make sense on the other side. None of this happens automatically because you got a nice new shiny tool. None of it. And I have worked with customers who put in new systems 10 years ago now and never quite understood what they needed to do. I've worked with customers who have 17-page topics because a topic is a chapter, because they don't understand what it takes to componentize and work with that content. I personally call that did a fail. If your topics have 17 pages in them and many heading levels and it's actually a chapter, you should have stuck with unstructured FrameMaker because you made your life way too complicated. An unstructured frame would have been much better for you than your new structured ecosystem. You've got to work with the content itself. Okay, so best practices. So there are a number of things that we can do and should do to content when we're transforming it from a monolithic whole into nimble, reusable chunks that can be mixed and matched on the fly to produce all different types of outputs. Many things. It's more than converting your format. It's more than, going from dot this to dot that. It's really about taking your prepackaged monolithic content and making it dynamic and making it modular and really making it so that you can customize and personalize that experience. As the very, very long title of the Personalization Paradox book says, we need to be able to do this at scale. And to do it at scale, you really need to follow a whole bunch of best practices to make it doable at all. I'm going to talk about each one of these. This is a handful. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's about 10 best practices when you're transforming content. There are more. I bet you can think of more that I haven't thought of. So we will talk about these, about chunking, about content types, about terminology and language, about starting strong and following your writing guidelines and consistency and thinking about your taxonomy and how things are organized and your metadata and how things are tagged and what do you do with figures and tables. So let's talk about each one of these best practices. So people often say to me, how do I know how big a chunk should be? Right? Because we know that we're chunking content into smaller modular units and that it makes them more reusable, right? The answer is it should be large enough that it covers one and only one piece of information, and small enough that you can use that information in many places. Sometimes it's more art than science. I can tell you that it gets easier the longer you do it. The more you do it, the easier it gets. When you do it well, you end up with units that really can be mixed and matched. And you end up having, with less rewriting when you have slight variations. There are a variety of ways to do this that use variables or conditions or conrefs, keyrefs, other kinds of things that you can do to take the same chunk and make it reusable in multiple places. But that's the first thing you're going to do, is really focus on how big should a chunk be. Some companies just decide, you know what, we're going to chunk at the heading 2 level. So anytime there's a heading 2, that's a new chunk. Some companies, anytime there's a heading 3, that's a new chunk. Some companies have other rules as to where a new chunk begins and ends. But in order to be versatile and reusable, that chunk of content really needs to cover only one piece of information. Don't go combining them, because you never know where you might need that chunk by itself without all the extra things you put into it. When you do your chunking, really think about your content types. So in DITA, there are a variety of content types. The 3 basic ones that have been around forever are tasks, concepts, and references. So this means that if you're writing an installation guide of some sort, and you're saying, here are the steps to put the unit into the rack, to mount the unit in the rack, this is not the place to talk about all the great things about rack mounting and how rack mounting is a brilliant idea, and all the different specifications of what the rack size needs to be. The task of mounting something in a rack is different from the concept of, this is all the conceptual information about rack mounting, which is different from all of the detailed tabular, usually reference information about the specification itself. And if you split these three things up, it makes it a lot easier, for example, to reuse the task and only the task in a knowledge base article that just has the task, or to combine it with other types of components in a training course. So split them up by content type, because remember, you can always put them back together. You can always put them back together. My favorite topic of terminology, I've been talking about terminology for, I think I've been using this example for going on 20 years now. Yeah, I think so. Stefan would know. We've known each other a long time. So you standardize your terminology if you're going to write in a structured environment. I cannot emphasize this enough. Let's just say there are 4 of us and we're all writing a big website, book, whatever, about how to work with Spot, this guy on the screen here. And I call Spot a dog, and someone else calls him a canine, and someone else calls him a snickerdoodle or a puppy or whatever, a hound, a pooch, or whatever. So we have all these different, chapters, how you walk this thing, how you feed it, how you train it. And we haven't all decided to call it a dog. And I put all these pieces together and I give it to my customer. And my customer's like, gee, gosh, is a dog the same? What is a canine? Is a dog the same thing as a canine? Is that the same thing as a hound? Gosh, when is it different for a puppy versus a grown dog? You need to be very specific and you need to decide in advance. And writing something about how to take care of your dog is likely simpler than the kinds of things that you and I write about on a daily basis. Usually what we're writing about is much more complex. Let's remember that the average reading level in the United States is between 6th grade and 8th grade. Other countries it's higher, other countries it's lower. We need to choose one term, hopefully the least complicated term, and use it everywhere because our customers will get confused. And everybody thinks their customers are smarter than the average reader, but that's not true. So let's make sure that we standardize our terminology so that every piece of content in the corpus can be mixed and matched with every other piece of content, and when you publish it, we all use the same words. It's very important, very simple. Okay, another best practice. Avoid dependent language. Dependent language is when this piece of content refers to another piece of content. Well, you never know where this piece of content is going to be used. Perhaps in your published piece that you're thinking about, it will be used with another piece of content. But in another environment, at another time, with someone else creating another deliverable, it may not be. So you need to make sure that if there's information someone must have that goes along with your current information, it's in the same chunk. And if it doesn't need to be dependent, then don't make it dependent. Some of the language that we use, if you say, later in this document or later in the chapter, or as we discussed previously, or, higher up on the page or down below, any words that anchor your content in time or space make it more difficult to reuse that content because you don't know where that content is going to be in time and space in the future. So if at all possible, avoid that dependent language that we put in just, we don't even think about it. Titles. The titles I've seen, make a standard, follow it, have guidance for how you're going to title things, whether it's the title of a chapter or the title of a section or whatever you're going to do. I've seen the same course have creating user groups and user management and grouping accounts in the same course or the same document. Decide what you're going to do and standardize it. Create this, modify that, verb this, verb that, or product name, noun, or tutorial : whatever imperative. So be consistent, have a standard, because otherwise when you go to mix and match, it's not going to make any sense. Start strong. So here's another thing. We write too much. Have you ever noticed that? We just write too much. We just take forever. We namby-pamby around and, talk about the weather and all sorts of things. Pretend your users are only going to see that heading and the first sentence. Get to the point right away. Don't namby-pamby around. I wonder if that's technically accurate, namby-pamby. Get to the point with clear, simple words, as few words as possible. Let's remember that nobody wants to read our content. I know it's depressing, but really nobody wants to read our content. They're reading our content because they have a job to do. So get to the point as quickly as you can. Follow your structured authoring guideline. This is easier said than done, but again, if you want to be consistent, if you want people to understand what you're saying, if you want to be successful with digital transformation, your content needs to make sense. It's plain and simple. It just is. Make sure that you have your plan for your taxonomy, how you're going to organize your content, and for your metadata, how you're going to tag your content. And your content needs to be tagged so that it is findable, and it needs to be applied consistently so that everything in a particular category is tagged the same way. So metadata is really important, and it's best to have a plan. Ad hoc metadata doesn't work too well, and it's not extensible very easily. So I recommend really working on how you're going to organize and find things before you start doing it. Just a couple of things on figures and tables. Avoid hard coding your numbers. Consider how you reference them, again, above and below. You just don't know where this image is going to need to be used. So just keep that in mind, and you can use variables for this. I would always avoid above and below, but do not hard code these things in. And please do not embed your text in your illustration. It is really a worst practice It is extremely problematic in translation. You end up spending a fortune translating. You're much better off, as in this figure, having A, B, C, and having a table that just defines them below. Just do not put text into the translation, into the figures, so that it's not a mess in translation. Okay, believe it or not, we made it to the end with a few minutes to spare for questions. So, digital transformation is more than new tools. Using new expensive tools with old crappy content gives you expensive crappy content. That's what I should have said in the beginning. Oftentimes, you're going to need to rewrite your content so that it's reusable. You're going to need to take out specifics, right? If you call something a widget rather than the Acme Widget 3000, well, then you could use that same information for the Acme Widget 3000, the Acme Widget 4000, and the Acme Widget 5000, or use variables, conditions, other ways to do it. Start strong, all the things that we just talked about, right? Start strong, get to the point, say the same thing the same way every time you say it. The more you standardize, the easier it is to personalize. I know that that sounds counterintuitive, but you have to standardize if you want to deliver personalized content at scale. Okay. Woo. With that, Stefan,
Woo! Yeah, I love the quote at the end, using new tools with old content makes expensive old content. That reminds me of that quote from Thorsten Dirks. I think at this time when he said that, he was at Vodafone, maybe. Today he's at the CEO of Eurowings and board of directors at Lufthansa. And he once, 5-6 years back, he said, if you digitize a shitty process, then you'll end up with a shitty digital process.
well, it's the same thing, right?
And it's true. It's true in a way.
It's exactly the same thing. And it ends up being far more expensive. And it's not any better. So, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So,